Have you ever walked away from a conversation feeling emptier than when you started? Why are we so afraid of silence that we rush to fill it with words that mean nothing? Could it be that, without realizing it, we are trading authenticity for acceptance? Nietzsche once wrote, "The most dishonest word in the world is, 'I'm fine,' when nothing is." With that phrase, he exposed what many of us feel but rarely have the courage to admit. We are surrounded by interactions that keep us at the surface, scripted exchanges performed like actors in a play we no longer believe in. Picture this. You bump into someone you know, and almost automatically you ask, "How are you?" "Everything good," when in reality you don't truly care about the answer. They respond, "All good," even though they might be falling apart inside. You both smile, exchange meaningless small talk about the weather, then move on, having fulfilled the script. But something inside remains untouched. Something in you craves more. Nietzsche understood this. He didn't avoid small talk out of arrogance, but because he saw time as too precious to waste on anything that doesn't transform us. In a letter written in 1879, he revealed just how urgent and personal this discomfort was to him. If you feel this too, if you're tired of words that don't connect, if you long for something deeper, then this video is for you. Let's dive into Nietzsche's thought and uncover what truly intelligent people do when they refuse to waste their existence on empty words. This isn't about being antisocial. It's about having the courage to seek depth in a world that glorifies shallowness. Get ready, because by the end of this journey you might never see a conversation the same way again. And who knows, you may begin to transform even your most ordinary exchanges into something that actually matters. There's something deeply unsettling about talking to someone and realizing that, deep down, no one was really there. It's like dancing without music. There's movement, rhythm, but no soul. Modern society, with its rules and invisible scripts, has taught us to speak without saying anything. Nietzsche couldn't stand it. And if we're honest, neither can many of us. Friedrich Nietzsche didn't just dislike superficiality, he waged a quiet war against it. In an era when European salons were filled with elegance, tea, and empty pleasantries, Nietzsche moved through those rooms like a stranger among masks. Not because he lacked manners, but because he sensed something vital was being suffocated under the layers of social convenience: truth. In 1869, he wrote to his sister Elizabeth, "I have no time for carefully constructed lies dressed as good manners. If someone asks me how I am, they should be ready to hear the truth." Statements like that often cause discomfort, surprise, and distance. But Nietzsche accepted the cost. Where most saw politeness as a glue for social life, he saw it as a wall keeping souls apart. The more people tried to appear pleasant, the less they said what they truly felt. Surface-level talk wasn't just cultural habit. It was fear in disguise, a form of avoidance wrapped in etiquette. He saw this as a silent illness, one that eroded authenticity. He watched brilliant thinkers, artists, academics, people capable of depth, lowering themselves to fit into pre-approved conversations. For Nietzsche, that was not diplomacy. It was betrayal. Betrayal of intelligence. Betrayal of self. One of the most symbolic moments of this quiet rebellion came during a dinner, where the group enthusiastically debated the weather. Nietzsche stood up and walked out. Not out of rudeness, but conviction. Every minute spent on meaningless talk was, for him, a minute of real life wasted. His abrupt exit scandalized the room, but it was consistent with his philosophy. What doesn't elevate us diminishes us. More than a philosopher, Nietzsche was a consciousness agitator, and his provocations weren't confined to books. During his time as a professor in Basel, he would invite students on intense philosophical walks through the Swiss countryside. He wouldn't lecture, he'd ask. One student later wrote, "His questions made me doubt even the truths I never thought to question." For Nietzsche, real conversation had to disrupt, had to unsettle, had to pierce something deep. Our assumptions, our fears, our contradictions, and the silence between words was just as important as the words themselves. Because only in the pause, in the space where no one's performing, does transformation begin. That may sound extreme. It is. But maybe that's the point. In a world addicted to comfort, truth sounds like rebellion. Nietzsche didn't just want to talk, he wanted to wake people up. He wanted to shake them from the daily anesthesia of small talk. But don't mistake him for someone who lacked sensitivity or tact. He wasn't calling for rudeness. He knew not every moment demands intensity. In his later writings, he acknowledged there's wisdom in knowing when to stay on the surface and when to dive deep. The problem, he believed, is that most of us never dive. We linger forever at the edge of the pool, afraid of what we might find beneath the surface. Nietzsche saw that fear as one of the greatest obstacles to human evolution. You cannot grow without confrontation, and you cannot truly confront without authentic dialogue. That's why he used conversation as a philosophical tool, not to destroy, but to reveal. His relationship with Richard Wagner is a powerful example. From their very first meeting, instead of the usual polite exchange, they launched into a 4-hour discussion about Schopenhauer and the will. Wagner would later write, "He didn't speak to impress, he spoke to reveal." Because deep down, we all hunger for that kind of exchange. Nietzsche's quiet rebellion was a call to stop pretending we're satisfied. To reject superficial talk isn't to isolate yourself, it's to make a decision to stop living on autopilot and start seeking the essential. That doesn't mean intelligent people hate conversations. On the contrary, they love them. But not all kinds. They crave something that functions both as a mirror and a cliff, something that reflects, but also challenges. A strange kind of dialogue that forces you to see yourself more clearly and more honestly. Nietzsche called these dangerous questions. Not the kind you ask to sound smart, the kind that pull the floor from under your beliefs. The ones that don't just challenge what you think, they challenge who you are. He believed the heart only reveals itself when struck in the right place, where the discomfort lives. That's why his most memorable conversations didn't begin with "how's work," but with things like, "Do you still believe in what you believed a year ago?" That's why real conversations require courage. They're not safe. They're minefields of discovery. You walk in thinking you're exchanging ideas and walk out changed. Sometimes with more questions than answers. And that's the point. Because in uncertainty, growth begins. His conversations with Lou Salome stretched on for days, diving into topics from the nature of love to the death of God. Witnesses described them as both uncomfortable and strangely magnetic. Years later, Lou wrote, "Nietzsche had this almost frightening ability to turn any conversation into a soul examination." But here's what's most fascinating. This hunger for depth didn't die in the 19th century. It's being rediscovered today, not just by philosophers, but by professionals, leaders, teams, even dating apps. Yes, even Tinder is trying to go deeper. Companies like Microsoft have redesigned meetings to include space for meaningful conversation. Instead of opening with, "How was your weekend?" leaders ask, "What challenged your thinking this week?" The result? Stronger engagement, better emotional connection, and even improved productivity. Because where there's real connection, there's collaboration. In some Silicon Valley startups, philosophy meetings are replacing standard brainstorming sessions. They begin with questions like, What belief about our product might be completely wrong? These questions don't just boost creativity, they strengthen the human bond behind the work. Even in social circles, we're seeing this shift. Instead of chatting about trending shows, some friend groups are hosting big questions nights where everyone brings one existential question to the table. In Seattle, one such group reported that after 6 months, their friendships became more honest, more grounded, and more real than they'd ever been, even after years of knowing each other. Why does this happen? Because deep conversations meet a core human need: to be truly seen and to truly see others. We're surrounded by people who know our names, our jobs, our favorite foods. But very few know our fears, our contradictions, our silent regrets. That's where the real difference lies. Not between being social, but being connected. Nietzsche once said that true friendship isn't built on agreement. It's built on shared confrontation. When we disagree honestly, when we show vulnerability instead of polish, something real begins to form: trust. Not the image-based trust of appearances, but the grounded trust of shared truth. This is why intelligent people avoid hollow conversations. Not out of arrogance, but because they've learned to value their time, their energy, their presence. They know life is too short to be filled with words that don't touch, and far too long to spend it with people who can't handle your voice at full volume. And if you've made it this far, maybe you're already part of this group, even if you haven't quite figured out how to break the pattern. Don't worry. You don't need to isolate yourself or become arrogant. It only takes one decision: to start bringing a little more truth into your conversations. Because deep down, we all crave it. That kind of exchange that makes you forget your phone, that glance that says, "I get you." That one sentence that stays in your chest for days because it lit a fire you didn't know was there. And it all begins with one simple choice: to stop accepting the superficial as enough. To begin seeking, even in the most ordinary encounters, something that actually transforms. We're surrounded by voices, but we hear less and less. And when we do speak, we talk about everything, except what actually matters. It's like we're all wearing masks, reciting memorized lines from a script where the only rule is, don't make anyone uncomfortable. But Nietzsche offered something different. He wanted us to break the script. For him, real connection starts the moment we drop the performance and speak from the soul. He wasn't calling for rudeness. He was calling for authenticity. And maybe right now that's more urgent than ever. The good news: there's a practical way forward. And no, it's not about quoting Nietzsche in every conversation or starting your family dinner with "God is dead." It's about slowly developing what he called the art of conscious conversation. A style of dialogue that doesn't stay shallow, but doesn't force depth either. Nietzsche called these moments rituals of dialogue. He would start with something seemingly simple, like a comment about the weather, and then guide it towards something deeper: the concept of change, the passage of time, the fragility of now. Today, this has an actual name: depth scaffolding, the practice of building bridges from the trivial to the essential. Want an example? Instead of asking, "How was your weekend?" try asking, "What surprised you this week?" Or even, "What have you been thinking about lately but haven't shared with anyone?" Simple, director, human. The kind of question that opens doors, that disarms, that says, "I'm here, I'm listening, for real." In professional environments, this shift has the power to reshape entire teams. Companies like Google and Spotify have already implemented internal spaces called depth channels, where employees share not just results, but doubts, anxieties, and personal insights. And the outcome isn't just emotional, it's practical. More innovation, stronger cooperation, and less burnout. In family settings, the impact is just as powerful. One American family told how they transformed their dinners with a simple ritual called the question bowl. Each member would draw a meaningful question like, "What's the most important memory from your childhood?" And everyone had to answer. Over time, their conversations grew more vulnerable, more human, more real. Nietzsche would have called this the resurrection of the soul of dialogue. And when it comes to friendships, the effect is even more profound. A group of friends in Seattle replaced their usual hangouts with philosophical game nights, exploring existential themes with humor and honesty. 6 months later, they described a sense of belonging and depth they had never experienced before, not even after years of knowing each other. But all of this only becomes possible when we're willing to pay the price of authenticity, because there are risks. When you show who you truly are, you risk being judged, misunderstood, not reciprocated. Nietzsche knew this. He wrote, "He who dares to go deep must accept being alone." Yet he also believed that such loneliness was just the beginning of true communion. Because once someone breaks the pattern, once someone dares to say something real, it sparks courage in others too. Have you ever felt that? That moment when someone spoke with unexpected honesty, and you, almost without thinking, did the same? That's the power of real conversation. It liberates, it spreads, it invites transformation. And the beauty is, you don't need to be Nietzsche. You don't need to quote Kant or Plato. You just need to show up. Look someone in the eye. Listen with real interest. Ask questions that matter to you. And be patient with silence. Because sometimes it's in the silence where the truth finally shows up. And then, he answered. For the first time that night, someone said something that had nothing to do with the weather or the barbecue. And for half an hour, right there by the kitchen counter, we stopped pretending. That's when I understood, not in theory but in practice, what Nietzsche had been screaming in silence through his writings. That truth needs space. That real connection begins the moment we dare to cut through the noise, and that a simple question asked with sincerity can open doors we didn't know existed. Now, I want to offer something that isn't for everyone, but it might be for you, the one who stayed through this conversation until the end, searching for something deeper. I created more than just a book. I designed a map for the soul. A manual that blends science, philosophy, and psychological insight to help you break mental patterns, question your identity, and rebuild from the inside out. This is not a motivational ebook full of empty phrases. It's a guide for those who are done living on autopilot. If something inside you is asking for change, for clarity, for evolution, this is your moment. Click the pinned comment and access the manual for self-transformation now. Don't read it out of curiosity. Read it because your life might depend on it. And if you decide to begin this journey, I promise, you won't be the same at the end. If this video stirred something in you, discomfort, memory, or desire for change, then it served its purpose. Because deep down, we're all tired of pretending, and only when we take off the masks do we start to truly meet each other. You, who stayed with me until now, are part of a rare group. People who still value depth, silence, and conversations with meaning. And for that, from the bottom of my heart, thank you. Thank you for making this more than content, for making it a real encounter. If this made you rethink that elevator small talk, or reconsider the next automatic "I'm fine," then you already know. This isn't a space for surface talk, so if you crave ideas that unsettle more than they comfort, and precisely for that reason set you free, leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments. What was the most meaningful conversation you've ever had? Or What's a question you've always wanted to ask, but haven't yet found the courage? And if you're not subscribed yet, come on, what are you waiting for? Another chat about the weather? Hit the button, because around here, we're not afraid of silence. We just refuse to accept emptiness. See you in the next one.